Hey everyone, Cycreasin here, and today I want to talk about talent. Dun dun dun! And is it real? Does it exist? Um, when I was young, I was told that I was talented. And I believed it because I drew things better than the kids around me. Now, that doesn't mean they were good, it just means they were better than the kids around me. But once I got into high school, I met people who drew much better than me, and so I decided that I must not be that talented after all, or that my talent had run out at some point. And it wasn't until many years later that I came across this idea that maybe it's all about hard work. And it wasn't that I wasn't talented, it was just that wasn't working hard enough. And so I started working harder and I started improving more. It still took a long time, but eventually I started to think that, hey, maybe talent doesn't matter at all. Maybe there is no such thing as talent. Maybe it just was that those people who were better than me probably just did a lot more drawing. And then later in life, I met people who sort of made me believe in talent again, simply because they would do things that, I don't know, it didn't make sense to me how they were able to do it, because I would ask them to explain it, and they couldn't really say what they were doing. They would always say things like, oh, you just feel it out. And this was so frustrating to me because I'm someone who thinks pretty analytically. So I need to understand why something is happening and not just feel it out. That didn't mean anything to me. But I still thought maybe I don't know, maybe this talent is still not a big deal. And the hardest thing was meeting students who, some students were more the way I was. It wasn't easy for them to learn concepts. Well, for me, it's easy to learn concepts, but not to apply them. But yeah, I would meet some students who were very, I want to say, talented, because they just picked up on things really quickly. And then I met Kim Jung-gi, who just, if you don't believe in talent, just look at him and you'll believe in it. And so what I decided is, okay, so talent must exist because I see it in front of me, but so what, Is there a way I can understand this? And I really did want to understand it. Especially, I wanted to understand why people would say you just feel it out, and what that meant, and where that's coming from. And I figure there's probably three things about talent. One is that there are people who just have a physical difference. Maybe it's a photographic memory. With Kim Jung-gi, he mentioned that he was hit in the head at a young age with a baseball, and after that he just kept drawing. And it's something I kind of believe, because I heard a story of some guy who got hit by lightning, and then he started playing piano all the time and got really good at it, but he was a doctor before, something like that. Anyway, so there's that. And that's something that I don't think, unless in the future we can take pills or do something that, enhances areas of our brain. That's something you can't control, so okay, put that off to the side. Okay, well, then there's this other thing, which is people who just feel it. And then I started noticing a pattern. Whenever I talk to people who had this thing where they just say, oh, I just feel it out, they all mentioned that they would copy drawings of art they liked at a young age, and started to think, wait, does that have anything to do with it? And I talked to Jet from the Jetty Jet show, and he mentioned that he hadn't thought about it, but yeah, he did copy stuff from a young age, and I just started encountering more and more of these so-called talented artists who had this same story, that when they were young, they copied stuff. And I remember back to when I was young, and I did not copy anything. I had two flawed beliefs. One is that I thought copying was somehow, I don't know, morally or ethically wrong. Um, I don't know. I thought, no, that's. I don't know if it was cheating, but it just felt wrong somehow. And the other thing is that I thought, well, I'm not good at copying anyway. And both of those were wrong. Um, there's nothing ethically or morally wrong about copying. In fact, there's nothing even wrong about tracing. And this is another hot topic. But I think the problem with tracing is when you trace stuff that you couldn't draw for the purpose of something to show others as if you did, you know? Like, hey, here's my work. Oh, that's a cool face. How'd you do that? And you actually traced it off a photo. It's like, well, that's not what I think is helpful when you trace. And I don't trace, but I did it once just to try. A few months ago I did it. And what I realized is it teaches you a lot in terms of how to make lines, especially angles or curves that you're not used to making. You might see someone's artwork and you think like, well, okay, I would draw like a certain thing. And if you do a copy, a straight up copy, you might make the mistake that maybe you make an arm too short or something when it's actually much longer, but you don't actually see it. Whereas when you trace it, while you're tracing it, if you're thinking like, well, how would I draw this? And then you imagine yourself drawing it while you're tracing it, then you hit things where it's like, oh wow, I would have stopped the arm a long time ago. Okay, so he makes the arms longer. Or I would have made this angle more severe, but it's actually a very gentle angle. Things like that, little things that I think you can learn from just a little bit of tracing. I don't even think you need to do too much. You just need to do, a few pages and probably figure out, okay, so these are my tendencies. I tend to do this like this. And that was important, but more important for me was that, okay, well, I didn't copy at a young age. I understand why this is helpful now, because people who copy from other people at a young age, what they're doing is, first of all, they have a standard, and this is so important. I've heard people who say they aren't improving, and what I think it is that they're not comparing to a standard. So, for instance, if I wanted to draw a hand and I have reference of a hand and then I draw that reference, then I have a point of comparison. I know, is my hand correct? Does it look like the other hand or does it not? Now, if I just draw it from imagination, what's my point of reference? If you've got a good visual library, that's your point of reference. But if you don't, and for me, it wasn't even that I didn't, it just took me so many years of drawing to develop one. But yeah, it's a case of not having a point to compare it to. That's probably why you're not improving. And that's why also you should do many drawings of the same thing, so that you draw it once, it's like, okay, that's my first step. Try again to improve. But again, you need something to compare it to. So with these people, they were drawing works by artists, obviously, at that time, better than them. And often they would draw the work of their favorite artists, and so they're drawing pretty high-level stuff, or at least getting used to moving their arm, creating those shapes, and building up a sense of basic proportion, this is kind of how things look. And they draw poses that maybe someone like me who never copied, I just couldn't think of those poses. And so what happens is later on, they develop a sense of what looks right and what doesn't look right. So when they draw and they're making a drawing and it sort of doesn't look right, they know, okay, well, I remember a long time ago, or even if they don't consciously remember it, they get a sense of like, yeah, this line should probably be here. And that's what they mean by, I think, I mean, all this is just me making stuff up from my brain. And so they get a sense of, I just feel it, you know? I don't need to know, or I don't need to analyze it, because I just feel where this goes. And then if someone asks them, maybe they would say, well, it's just intuition. And then someone from the outside might look at that and say, well, they just feel things out and they have intuition. I guess they have talent, right? But understanding this means there is a root cause of that so-called talent. And for someone who's young, you can take advantage of it. You can actually start practicing to develop that simply by copying good artists and doing it a lot. So that's what I would have told myself is when I was young, okay, do that. But what if you're in my situation and you didn't copy when you're young? Now what? Well, the thing is, you still can do the same thing. You still can copy now, you know? One of the things is that I thought I couldn't copy or I wasn't good at copying. The thing is that this is also the reason why people say they can't draw from imagination, but they can draw from reference. The thing is that, well, when you draw from reference, of course it's easier because you have something to copy. And you have a standard of what you think looks right. And then when you draw from imagination, it does not meet that standard. And I used to try composing music. I still try sometimes. But I have no formal training or pretty much any training whatsoever, so I don't know anything. But I just had fun composing music, so I would compose music. But I knew people who were training to be concert pianists, and they didn't compose. And it was weird to me, like, wait, why don't you compose? You are really good. And the answer I kept hearing was that, well, because my work sounds horrible. And it wasn't. It wasn't that it sounded horrible. It was that they would play pieces by Beethoven or Rachmaninoff or Debussy or Prokofiev, and it's like, okay, so that is your standard. And then by comparison, their work that they do from their own mind seems worse, and so they think they're no good. And that's the same thing that happens when you draw, when you're good at drawing from reference and you try imagination. Now, what's the solution? Just keep doing it. Just keep composing for the composers, or just keep drawing from imagination, because, yeah, of course it's going to look worse. It's harder. It's harder to do things from imagination. It took me many years, and I still find that, if I draw something and I have a reference, it will look better than if I just draw things from my mind. And hopefully one day that'll turn around, but at this point it hasn't. But the reason I said I wasn't good at copying is because when I would draw from the reference and I'm just copying it for the sake of copying, I have the reference to compare it to. So I look at my copy and it's like, well, that doesn't look as good as the reference, so I must suck at copying. Instead of thinking, this is my first drawing from this reference, and this reference is from someone who's been drawing thousands or hundreds of thousands of images. So why would it be that good? I just need to keep copying more and more. So I think that's really important. Just understanding the reality of things, and like why Why would you expect something you draw from imagination to be as good as your things from reference? How does that make sense? Why would that make sense? Why would that be the way it is? It isn't. Like, it shouldn't be, right? Like, it's kind of obvious that, no, yeah, of course I should be trying more. Like, it's not going to look good. And I think the problem, again, and I brought this up before, is this idea of you have an expectation, a standard that, or not a standard, you have an expectation of what you want to produce. So you're goal oriented, you're results oriented rather than process oriented. Process oriented means I know I'm going to improve by doing stuff. So I'm just doing it and enjoying it. And yeah, it's not good. The next one's going to be better. That's okay. You're into the process. It's not the end result. Result oriented is where I see the most problems, and this is how I was, where I would sit down and think I'm going to do a drawing of whatever, and then get disappointed when it did not come out the way it was in my mind. And I don't see a problem with this. I think this is something you should do, but it's not what you judge your skill on or your improvement on, especially not your improvement. Because that's not going to help you improve fast. Because let's say I do one drawing and I think I'm doing a scene in my mind and it turns out a certain way. And then I do another drawing maybe a few days later and it's like, okay, so that was two drawings, and that's not enough to help you improve. And also you're drawing completely different things, completely different subject matter. Forget the subject matter. It's just different. You don't have a reference to improve on. So what I started doing is just looking at other artists more and copying their works more. But again, advice that Jet gave me is that don't copy the whole image. For instance, let's say you want to learn how to draw or how a certain artist draws eyes. Just go through all their work and just copy the eyes. And I would recommend to even copy the same eyes a few times until you get it right. But let's say that's a method you would do. Okay, then what's going to happen is you are going to improve at drawing those eyes. And then you might think, well, okay, now I'm good at drawing these eyes, but I suck at drawing everything else. Well, yeah, so then you tackle each issue one at a time. And that's also the way I think it helped me to learn anatomy, because if you look at an anatomy book, and I heard of people who would simply open up the book and just copy every single image from front to back, and they said this helped them learn anatomy. Now, I'm pretty sure all of those people were the same people who copied things from a young age. Like, they've already developed that talent. And if you find you're good at drawing and things come easy to you, maybe you can actually write in the comments if that is the case. Like, because I'm open to being wrong. I just have this feeling that I think most people who are, really good at a later age probably started copying from things at a young age. And when I say good, I mean kind of scary good, like, because there's good, and I was, as I said before, I thought I was talented. People said I was good, but it's like, yeah, you're better than the kids in your class, but are you like almost professional level, or like those scary good people where it's like, wait, what? Man, because there's a lot of those people around. And yeah, I'm curious to know if that's common. Okay, so the last thing I want to touch on with talent is, let's say you are copying and you're doing all that, and whatever results you're having, but I do think people have natural predispositions to certain things. They're better at doing some things than others. And I think the best way of utilizing talent is to find out what you like and what you do well. and using that. So something that happened with me, and I know a couple of my friends who are artists who have this same problem, is they think because they can do something easily, it must not be good. And when they do things that are difficult, they think, well, now I'm improving. And I had this a lot where I would spend hours and hours and hours and hours on something that was painful and hard for me because I wasn't good at it and I didn't like doing it, but I worked a lot. And I would show people the end result, and it's like, yeah, it's okay. Whereas I really wanted them to say, wow, you improved so much. I noticed all these things that you did, that because I felt I was improving. It's like, oh, wow, I'm getting better at, I don't know, rendering. Or I didn't know how to do this, and now I can do that. And instead, it was just like, meh. And then I would do like the simplest drawing that takes me no effort, and it's like an expression, a caricature or something. And people would be impressed by it. They'd be like, wow, that's cool. And I'd think, yeah, but that was easy. That's not good, though. That's, as if easy meant not good and hard meant good. It doesn't. And what's so important is to realize that when you look at people who are extremely successful, they just do what they like to do. They're using this comes easy to me as an advantage. So it's important to figure out who you are. And this takes time. It took me many years to learn who I was, but it probably would have taken me less time had I been focusing on that from the start. So what are my talents? My talents are, I am good at analysis. I can break down complex ideas into manageable chunks. Okay. I'm pretty good with eyes. I'm pretty good with faces. I like faces. I like characters. I like expression, emotion. And I like style. Okay. So then it's up to me to use that. It's like, okay, so those are your strengths. That's your army. Someone who might be the type who learned by copying. It's like, well, okay, I have a natural sense of what looks right. And so they have their advantage, and then it's about using that. If you're a person who maybe you've got a good sense for design, then it's like, okay, well, maybe you should incorporate that more. Maybe you should do more design work. If you are someone who is, you just find things like perspective really simple. It's like, okay, that's awesome. Maybe you could do something with that, like architecture. Concept art is very perspective heavy. Actually, everything is perspective heavy. Comics are perspective heavy. So anything with that. So I think that's where it really shines, is that when you stop, there's the expression, no pain, no gain. I don't think this is true. Honestly, I don't think so, because I would look at people doing stuff and they would do a ton of drawings. So yeah, it seems like it's hard, right? They're doing hundreds of drawings and it's like, wow, that is hard work that you're doing. And no pain, no gain, right? Well, the thing is that if they were drawing something they were interested in, that's not work. It is work, but it's not hard work. It's not painful. Because when I would draw things I'm interested in, it just was kind of fun. It's like, oh, okay. But I know from experience, when I would do things I don't want to do or I don't like doing, then it really does feel like work. It's like, oh, I have to practice drawing buildings. I hate drawing buildings. And when I did it, it felt like a chore. But it shouldn't. When you know what you want, it becomes fun. Or at least interesting, at least that much. So it's not that hard. When I was doing value studies, I was doing still lifes and things, and I did a lot of drawing. I did like easily over 12 hours a day, and it wasn't hard. It was just, oh, okay. I know I had a purpose. So I don't agree with the no pain no gain mentality. I think instead it is, you have to do a lot of work, and you're gonna do the best work if you're interested in it, and if it's something you like. That comes through no matter. People can tell, and I've had enough cases where I show them work, and I'm not saying like, hey, this piece I enjoyed and it was easy for me, and that piece is hard, but they always pick the piece that was easier for me as that's the good one. That's the one I gravitate towards. So yeah. So if you are young, copy a lot and have a standard. If you want to improve, have a standard. Do something from something. Don't just say, oh, I'm going to draw a picture and I'm going to do a girl sitting at a desk, blah, blah, blah. You have the story in your mind. No, have some, because there's two things. There's practicing and there's performing. They're completely different things. Performing is when, you have your story, you want to execute, here's my picture. That should be easy. It's the practicing that is hard. It's the practicing that's like, oh, I'm thinking, I'm using my energy to figure stuff out. But the performance should be easy. It shouldn't. If you're doing a drawing and it's really tough, and it's like, maybe you're doing a drawing for someone and it's really difficult for you, then that means you are not doing the practicing well. I mean, going back to piano, it's just an easy analogy for me to make. It's like, well, if a pianist went to the piano and they were playing a new piece during performance, that would be terrible. You don't do that. You practice the piece and you get good at it, and then you play it, and then it should be easy when you play it for other people. That's and I think that's one of my goals, is just to get it so people view art the same way they view other fields, because it's no different. And this idea of, well, this person's talented and there's talent and all this stuff, it's like, no, there's a reason for this. There's always a reason for it. And we got to figure out the reason. And once you know the reason, you can figure out how to make it work for you. So even if you're older, there's a way to make it work for you. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. Hope that helped, and thanks for watching.